The chandelier sparkled above the grand oak chess table, its light casting long shadows across the marble floor. A hush fell over the lavish drawing room as the final seconds ticked away on the ornate chess clock. On one side sat the millionaire, sharp suit, steely gaze, fingers steepled under his chin. Across from him, a boy of no more than 12 leaned back slightly in his chair, calm as still water. The spectators, waitstaff, security, and a few curious guests stood frozen. Click. The boy moved his knight, bold, unorthodox, brilliant. The millionaire's eyes widened ever so slightly. His hand hovered over the board, uncertain for the first time all evening. The silence grew unbearable. Then he leaned back. Checkmate. A gasp rippled through the room. The boy's face didn't change. He simply looked at the board, then up at the man who owned everything in the room except this moment. The mansion stood like a palace on the hill, 5 stories tall, white stone exterior, fountains at the front, and a driveway so long it could host a marathon. Inside, everything gleamed, floors polished to mirrors, ceilings etched with gold leaf, art so expensive it didn't even have price tags. Its owner, Mr. Lancaster, was a man of vast wealth and even vaster pride. His name adorned hospital wings and university libraries. He spoke in firm, clipped tones, always wore cufflinks, and rarely looked down, especially not at his staff. Among them was Margaret, the maid. She had worked in the mansion for nearly 7 years, always on time, always precise. She was a quiet woman, her eyes soft but strong, her uniform immaculate. She never spoke unless spoken to, and she never complained, even when her back ached or her shift ran long. And then there was her son, Isaiah. Small for his age, quiet even at home. Isaiah had an old soul. While other kids played video games, he was solving logic puzzles or buried in books from the mansion's library when no one was looking. He was curious, observant, polite to a fault. To Mr. Lancaster, Isaiah was little more than a shadow, a child trailing behind the help. He had no idea the boy had been studying him, watching, learning. The boy was on his way to the kitchen with a stack of clean linens when he passed by the open double doors of the game room. It was the only room in the mansion with a fireplace still lit, casting a warm glow on the grand chessboard set in the center. The pieces were beautiful, polished ivory and ebony, carved like tiny works of art. He paused just for a second. "Keep walking, Isaiah," his mother said quietly behind him, balancing a tray of silverware. "And don't touch anything in that room, ever." He nodded. But something in that room had already touched him. A few days later, Isaiah lingered near the hallway as Mr. Lancaster entertained the guest. They were playing chess, the millionaire narrating each move with smug precision. "That's check in 4 moves. Unless you see it, you won't." Isaiah didn't blink. He watched the board. He saw it. That night, at home in their small apartment above the garage, he pulled out the old tablet his mother used to keep grocery lists and downloaded a free chess app. It was slow, buggy, but it worked. He studied for hours, memorizing famous openings, learning strategies. When the tablet died, he borrowed books from the mansion library, slipping them into his backpack when no one noticed. The boy, who had always loved puzzles, had just found the ultimate one. Mr. Lancaster fancied himself a gentleman of refinement, a man of intellect and culture. Chess, to him, wasn't just a game. It was proof of superiority. "I've never lost a game," he often said with a self-satisfied chuckle, swirling his scotch. "Well, maybe once in college, but that guy became a grandmaster, so it hardly counts." He played often, usually with business associates or politicians who came for dinner. He relished the way they squirmed under pressure, how he dismantled their strategies piece by piece. It was a show of power. One afternoon, after crushing his opponent in under 15 minutes, Mr. Lancaster leaned back in his chair and glanced over at Margaret, who had just entered with a fresh tray of hors d'oeuvres. "Maybe even your kid wants to play me," he said with a laugh, his voice echoing around the marble room. Margaret paused for just a second, forcing a polite smile. "He's quiet, sir. but he watches a lot. Lancaster chuckled again, brushing her off. All kids watch. Doesn't mean they understand what they're seeing. He turned back to reset the board, already bored of the conversation. To him, Margaret was a good worker, reliable and respectful. Her son? Just a quiet shadow, harmless and small. What he didn't know was that Isaiah had already memorized half his favorite openings, just from watching. Here's the next part of your story, continuing with strong narrative flow and character depth. It happened on a rainy Saturday, the kind that kept even the wealthiest stuck indoors. Mr. Lancaster had no meetings, no guests, just a glass of scotch and a restless itch for amusement. Margaret entered the study with the vacuum, Isaiah trailing behind with a small dustpan. The boy's eyes drifted, as always, to the chessboard by the window. Lancaster noticed. A smirk crept across his face. "Tell me, Isaiah, is it? Ever play chess?" Isaiah paused, eyes wide. "A little, sir." "A little?" Lancaster barked a laugh. "Well then, maybe you'd like to play me around." He gestured to the board with theatrical flair, clearly amused by his own generosity. The room chuckled. One of the security guards even snorted. "A maid's kid? Please?" Margaret straightened up, stiff. "Sir, I'm sure he doesn't want to bother you." But Isaiah stepped forward, shy but steady. "I'd like to try." Lancaster raised an eyebrow. "Well, don't say I didn't warn you. Come then." Margaret looked at her son. His eyes weren't playful or starstruck. They were focused. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay respectful, win or lose." Isaiah sat across from the millionaire, legs swinging just above the floor. The room quieted as Mr. Lancaster began arranging the pieces. Everyone assumed it would be over in 10 minutes. No one expected the storm that was about to hit. The millionaire set up the board with practiced ease, tossing casual glances at the small crowd gathering in the doorway. "White or black?" he asked, already assuming the boy wouldn't know the difference. "Black," Isaiah said softly. "I like to respond." A few raised eyebrows. Lancaster shrugged and moved his first pawns with flair. E4, classic. Isaiah leaned in, his brow furrowed. He took his time, moved with care. D5. The first 5 moves were slow, methodical. The millionaire didn't bother hiding his boredom. He made exaggerated sighs, cracked his knuckles, sipped his drink. "Not too late to back out," he joked, moving his queen out early. "Most grown men fold before I castle." But then Isaiah took his knight, clean, unexpected. Lancaster blinked. "Huh." He adjusted in his seat. A few more moves, and he lost a bishop, then a rook. The laughter in the room had stopped. Someone whispered, "Did he just trap him?" Lancaster frowned, now leaning over the board. He no longer looked amused. Isaiah's eyes were fixed, calculating 2 moves ahead. Each piece he touched was deliberate. Every exchange was intentional. He wasn't reacting. He was directing. By mid-game, Lancaster's position had begun to crumble. He looked up, searching the boy's face for signs of fear or bluff. But Isaiah didn't flinch. He was still playing, still responding, and the room had gone completely silent. Absolutely, here are the next 2 parts, building the tension and revealing Isaiah's hidden dedication with emotional and narrative clarity. The laughter had stopped. The amused smiles faded. What had started as a joke now hung in the air like a storm cloud. Mr. Lancaster leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. He was no longer toying with the pieces. He was analyzing, recalculating. His fingers tapped on the table as if he could summon brilliance through impatience. Across from him, Isaiah sat with quiet focus, his small hand steady as he slid his knight into position. Lancaster's brow furrowed. He had expected hesitation, nerves. Instead, the boy moved like someone who had played this game 1,000 times in his mind. "Where did you learn that move?" the millionaire muttered, not really expecting an answer. Isaiah simply shrugged. "I read it once." The room was still. Even the guards leaned in. Margaret stood by the doorway, her hands clasped tightly, trying to decide whether to be proud or afraid. She'd seen Mr. Lancaster lose patience over far less, and Isaiah, looked so calm, too calm. The pieces thinned. Lancaster lost another pawn, then his second knight. He cursed under his breath. Isaiah's face was unreadable. He wasn't playing for fun or to impress. He was playing to win. Every move echoed years of quiet study. Hours spent in shadows, learning without permission, without guidance. The tone had shifted. The joke was over. Now it was a real game. Long before he ever touched a real chess piece, Isaiah had fallen in love with the idea of the game. It started the first time he saw that chessboard in Mr. Lancaster's game room. Those tiny warriors frozen in place like secrets waiting to be unlocked. He didn't know the rules yet, but he could feel the importance of the game. At night, while his mother slept after long shifts, Isaiah borrowed her old tablet, cracked screen and all, and downloaded free chess apps. They glitched often, but he didn't care. He played hundreds of games against the computer, slowly figuring out how each piece moved, how they worked together. Eventually the tablet gave out, so he switched to the library. He rode his bike there after school, where he found ancient strategy books and dusty chess magazines no one read anymore. He watched online tutorials, paused videos frame by frame, rewound classic games over and over until he could play them from memory. He copied famous matches, Fischer, Kasparov, Carlsen, into a worn notebook he kept hidden under his bed. Each page filled with move sequences, diagrams, scribbled notes in the margins. He practiced endgames in his head while doing chores, calculated openings while folding laundry. He made imaginary opponents of tree branches, cereal boxes, and shadows. Not even his mother knew how deep it ran. To her, he was just quiet, curious. But inside, Isaiah was building a mind like a chess engine, one move, one sacrifice, one strategy at a time. Sweat beaded along Mr. Lancaster's temple. He adjusted his collar, tapped his fingers against the table, trying to regain composure. But his thoughts were jumbled, his strategy unraveling. He moved his rook too fast, a mistake. Isaiah didn't even blink. His hand shot forward, capturing the rook in a clean move. The boy was no longer tentative. He was in control now, reading the board like a map he'd walked 100 times. Two more moves, then another. The Millionaire's defenses crumbled piece by piece. The end came swiftly. Isaiah advanced his queen, cornering the king with precise inevitability. Lancaster scanned the board, desperate for an escape. There was none. "Checkmate," Isaiah said quietly. No gloating, no smile, just truth. The room was frozen. Mr. Lancaster stared at the board, eyes wide, lips parted, still trying to process what had happened. Isaiah sat quietly, hands folded in his lap, like the game had been nothing more than a simple task. Then, clap. One of the guests began to applaud. Another followed. Soon the entire room was filled with stunned but sincere applause. Margaret stood by the doorway, her hand over her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, but she couldn't speak. Mr. Lancaster finally looked up. How did you learn?" he asked, his voice soft, almost reverent. Isaiah simply shrugged. "I like puzzles." For a long moment, Mr. Lancaster just looked at him, really looked. The boy he'd never noticed, the child who had stood in the background, invisible. He rose from his seat and extended a hand. Isaiah hesitated, then shook it, firm, respectful, equal. "You've got a gift," Lancaster said. "I know a friend, a retired grandmaster. Would you want lessons?" Isaiah glanced at his mother. She gave the faintest nod, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "I'd like that." Margaret smiled through her tears, not for the invitation, but for the recognition. For the first time, they weren't just staff, they were seen. The story spread like wildfire across town. People whispered about the chess game in the mansion, the boy who beat the millionaire. Soon, a reporter called, then another. A small local paper ran the headline. Isaiah was invited to join a junior chess league. He was given a uniform, a seat at real tournaments, and a new chess set of his own. One he didn't have to borrow in secret, Quietly, humbly, he became a symbol, not just of talent, but of possibility. Mr. Lancaster did more than keep his word. He funded Isaiah's chess education personally, lessons with grandmasters, entry into competitions, travel expenses. He also promoted Margaret to house manager. No more uniforms, no more silence in the shadows. She walked the halls with dignity now. And when Isaiah qualified for his first national tournament, they packed their bags together. They walked out of the mansion side by side, no longer as servant and child, but as a proud mother and her extraordinary son, equals. In a world that often judges by background, appearance, or job title, it's easy to overlook brilliance hiding in plain sight. Mr. Lancaster nearly did, so did everyone else. But talent doesn't always come wrapped in privilege. Genius doesn't always speak loudly. And greatness, sometimes it's born in silence, in late-night study sessions, library corners, and second-hand books. Isaiah wasn't given much, but he took what little he had and turned it into something extraordinary. He didn't need permission to learn. He didn't wait to be seen. He just kept moving, one quiet step at a time. So the next time you look past someone, pause. Potential might be staring right back at you. Support education, support potential. Believe in those who are often overlooked, because brilliance isn't born in privilege, it's born in persistence. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Your next inspiration might come from the quietest voice in the room.